Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and today I want to continue following up on my stat line video by talking about how rogues cover for their weak brain stat. With Guardians, we found out that they generally just accept failure for their foot stat. They tend to have high enough health pools to soak the physical damage coming from foot treacheries, and they just accept failure. But rogues can't say the same. We've got just as bad of a head stat with an average of just over 2 across the rogue characters. Unfortunately, the average sanity of these characters is much lower, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 7. Almost all the Guardians had more than 7 health, so despite having a similar weakness, we have to deal with it very differently because we can't just tank it. And also, unlike Guardians, we don't have a load of assets with really efficient sanity soak. That's just not a thing Green has access to. We have a couple of allies, but none of them have 3 in their brain. We have no dedicated sanity soak like Cherished Keepsake or something worth fighting for. So rogues have to find some other way to deal with their terrible head score. At level 0, it's a grim look. You handle this one, which has become iconic because it's kind of the only universal choice they have. You just give the treachery to somebody else, and then it's not your problem. But it can only handle 2 encounter cards per scenario. It's not reliably doing more than that. And you have to actually draw these 2 specific cards, so you won't more than just you handle this one. You could run allies that have soak. The reason I have Leo DeLuca put separately is because he's the only one of these 4 that you would actually want to run in most decks. Lonnie is fantastic because if you have an item to heal, specifically Heavy Furs is the best choice for this slot. She can be 1 horror soak per round, which is really, really helpful. But she also costs 4 and gives a fist, so she's very expensive, and you have to have that combo in play. And if you're not playing a fighter, it feels pretty terrible, and 3 of these characters aren't fighters. Winifred, Skids, and Tony are the only ones that can ever really justify running Lonnie. For anyone else, she's just expensive sanity soak, which might still be worth playing if you don't have better options. Which gets into big money. Well Connected is the best tool Rogue has to cover their bad brain score, because you can just use it on the Mythos test every round to guarantee that you're not going to die. Money Talks is largely the same effect, but you can use it as a one-off event to get better numbers, which will be helpful earlier in scenarios. And at level 0, it's very likely worth a slot in your big money deck, simply because you wouldn't have that many cards that were relevant to what you were doing. But generally, when you look at level 0 rogues, you either go big money, you're a fighter who has a clear solution in mind, or you're looking for something in your off colors because you don't want your Leo to die. You want this guy in play and alive forever, and that just doesn't work out when you have brain this bad and head this bad, and your ally probably needs to die to soak. The more I've played the game, the more I've come to view level 0 Leo DeLuca and green characters as a trap. They need the health soak. They don't have the money to play him. Later on, Leo DeLuca will be incredibly playable in green characters, but at the start, he usually isn't actually the right ally to put in your deck. So how does your deck change as you get experience? What new options does Rogue unlock? Our first experience card is Savant. It's worth 1 question mark, and then it gains question marks equal to your lowest skill that isn't being tested. For everyone except Skids and Jenny, Savant on its own means you'll be testing at 5 head. Skids will test at 6, Jenny will test at 7. So Savant is not quite, but similar to a second copy if you handle this one, and it costs almost nothing. If you're in that spot where you don't have good level 0 answers, Savant is a nice way to pad that out. Precious Memento costs more experience than we'd like to spend on soak, but it is incredible soak. There's another version of this where it's from a future life and all the text is flip-flopped, so failing would heal horror instead. Succeed by 2 is an archetype for rogues, though, so healing horror is the one you want attached to Succeed by 2. This one is preferable. You might well get both, though. And this is essentially infinite horror soak. At worst, it's 3 horror soak. So you can just choose to run Precious Memento if you just want to put soak in your deck to brute force your way through it. I haven't brought out the experienced rogue allies, and the reason I haven't is, yes, they are better than these allies up here, but unfortunately they also serve really valuable points. The only real exception to that is Priest of Two Fates, who is 1 cost 2/2 soak, and probably should be with the rest of these cards. Unfortunately, this is where we get back into the big money archetype solving problems. Money Talks, when you upgrade it, becomes an incredible card instead of an acceptable one. It draws 1 card, so it's cycling itself, which is great now. but it also gains the ability to be played on other people at other locations. It's not quite a level 2 ward protection, but it's pretty damn close in terms of mitigating the encounter deck. Counterespionage, on the other hand, is better than level 2 ward protection. It just costs 6 to play. In addition to negating the revelation text, it'll also draw that person a card from their deck. And these team utility anti-encounter cards are both locked behind big money. Speaking of, the Black Fan is locked behind big money, gives you 1 additional sanity and +1 to your brain, which is why it's down here with Gios. I put Gios down here with the Black Fan because I think it's important to mention that if you are running Gios and the Black Fan and Dario, you reach a situation where you have +3 to your terrible brain score and you're actually relatively okay. Something that's very worth noting as well is Gios isn't exclusive with Savant. The promise that most people are going to make with Gios is I shall not commit any cards during each of my turns. And the Mythos phase isn't your turn. Since Gios is increasing all your stats by 1, it'll increase your head by 1, and then your lowest stat by 1 for Savant as well. So anyone running Gios and Savant has a very, very good chance of passing their head test. Up until now, the way I've talked, I've mostly just told you how these cards help to deal with the Mythos test. But frankly, most of them aren't great solutions. Your soak isn't efficient soak. If you just want to put 4 cards in your deck to deal with the Mythos test, you can run, you handle this one in Savant, but that's all it's doing. It doesn't feel good to use any of the solution rogues have for their low head. It's a big part of why I dislike Rogue, is because their best solution is to use all of these solutions at the same time. Dario Alamin would obviously come out if you weren't an investigator or if you had a better ally in your colors. But generally speaking, the way that rogues are most effective when it comes to dealing with their bad head is to run big money. Well connected on its own is going to fix your problem. Counterespionage and Money Talks are team utility that will fix the problem if you haven't drawn well connected yet. And then in addition to that, you're going to get the Black Fan. You can run Gios because you don't need skills in this deck because you're running the economy cards that are essentially keeping your costs down. So you can pump your brain by 2 all the time, 3 if you run Dario. You just solve the problem so cleanly by going big money. And instead of running 4 cards that are just there for your brain stat, you're running like this whole archetype package that is an entire game plan, but none of your cards exist just to deal with your low brain stat. It's largely because of Rogue's bad head and bad brains that I tend to feel like they're bottlenecked into running big money. And a lot of that is these 3 cards. They've come in the last 2 expansions. Counterespionage, Money Talks, and the Black Fan push Big Money Hoarder extremely hard. They've essentially printed Leo DeLuca and Gios in a hand slot and 4 copies of Warded Protection for this archetype. Intel Report also came out in the last 2 expansions, and it's an event that lets you get 2 clues without taking a test. And you end up in a situation where the cleanest thing to do for most characters is to play a big money deck. Even if you're not running these last 3, if you're not going for the stat pumps, these first 3 are incentive enough. You already need economy cards to play your deck. You already need to commit some number of cards to dealing with your bad head. Why not just go big money and solve both of those problems at once? And I don't mean this video to be a strict endorsement of big money as the best rogue archetype, though I do believe that to be the case. I mean this to highlight how bad I think the problem is. Rogues don't have good solutions to their bad scores in head and brain. They just don't. They're able to get by, but there's always an opportunity cost. It's always weighing them down and holding them back. It's why big money shines so much, is because there isn't an opportunity cost anymore. You're playing towards a goal instead of playing to prevent yourself from dying. And this should be an idea that's familiar to anyone who's played a lot of competitive games, whether it's strategy games or card games or what have you. Play to win, don't play to not die. That's what big money does. You aren't running them to prevent yourself from dying, you're running them because they're powerful. I feel like I'm probably rambling at this point. So, to end it here and summarize. Big money green is stupid. I hate how well it solves their core problem. I hate how hard it's been pushed over the past 2 expansions. And I hate that rather than thinking about if I want to play big money, I try to justify to myself why I'm not playing big money. And that's because big money is intrinsically tied to Rogue's bad head and brain stats. They have to deal with that, and big money does. And if they choose not to use big money, the number of options they have is pretty limited. It's basically bad soak, you handle this, and Savant. They can get by without using big money. I'm not pretending for a second they can't, and almost all of them have something in their off colors that's going to help them with this. But the most important point here is that unlike Guardians, who are going to ignore their bad foot test and just take the damage and be fine, and unlike Seekers, who we'll cover later, who have a terrible fist score but are actually insane at dealing damage, Rogues have a real weakness. Rogues aren't like Guardians and Seekers. Rogues have terrible heads, they're likely to fail the Mythos test for that stat, and take brain damage, which they have terrible brains too. It is a glaring weakness, and they struggle to deal with it. Of all the classes in the game, Rogues are the only one that have a weakness that is not adequately and completely dealt with through their card pool. And the main reason I'm so sad about that is because it keeps pushing me when I want to play optimally into this set of cards. Usually not Dario, let's be real. I think I've rambled enough. I think I've talked long enough about how strong big money is, and just how hard Rogues will have to struggle to deal with their bad head and brain stats if they don't go big money. I've been rather incoherent. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.